How's it going, everybody? My name is Parallax Abstraction, and welcome back to Retro Flashback, showcasing gaming's roots for a new generation. So, as promised, we are taking a look at Legendary Axe 2, obviously the sequel to the original Legendary Axe. And the reason we're diving right into the sequel of a series, which is something I don't usually do, is because, well, this series is an interesting example, or series, it's really just a pair of games, this is the only other one. It's an interesting example of what can happen when something that takes a genre and kind of does something innovative with it gets, I'm going to guess, a little bit of corporate dictatorial method applied to it. Maybe that's not what happened here, but it certainly seems like it. So, you're going to notice one thing off the bat here, which is that you'll see at the bottom there that Victor Musical Industries, who did the first game, was involved in this one as well, but you'll also see at the bottom two names, some of which may be familiar if you're a modern gamer, Red Entertainment and Atlas. So, Red is still around. They don't make a lot of stuff anymore, but they are still kicking. And Atlas is a publisher that actually was recently bought by Sega, but they still put out a whole bunch of different stuff on a lot of different platforms. They put out stuff like Demon Souls, a whole bunch of weird JRPGs, and they've published some other downloadable stuff recently as well. I actually don't know what their involvement was in this game because I can't find much about that. But I'm gonna assume they were involved in the development in some way because, well, you're gonna see just how different this is here. So let's get out of the attract mode. So you may remember the original game was about this sort of, I guess you could say, sort of caveman person trying to rescue his lady friend using his legendary axe and trying to get through a bunch of different levels with weird sort of not medieval enemies, but caveman era, prehistoric kind of enemies. This, not so much. So there is a story to this. It's basically pointless. It's in the manual. You're like overthrown by somebody or whatever. And, well, you're here to take your revenge. So, first things first, that ain't an axe, is it? Nope! It is not an axe. There is an axe in this game, and some would argue it is the best weapon in the game, but a game called Legendary Axe, your starting weapon, ain't an axe. Uh-huh. I don't get it either. I don't know what they were thinking with that, but so that's the main thing. Oh yeah, and then you switch to this, which is I don't even know what it is. It's like I guess this was their attempt at like a Castlevania whip. It's like this weird, like, I don't know, flower pot on the end of a chain that you whip out at things because, sure. So you can see here, I mean, it's a combat platformer, definitely adheres to a lot of the same tropes. It's got weird enemies, like guys like that you can behead and who will keep coming at you. But as you can see, this shares very little in common with the original Legendary Axe. I don't think it looks nearly as good. I think the music is actually kind of cool. Victor Musical Industries, what do you know? They were actually good at making music. Back to the sword. Shoot, that's not what I wanted. You can also jump really high, as you can see. The music in this is still kind of cool in that it's got this sort of dark, almost, if you wanted to call it the equivalent of, like, metal back in the 8-bit chiptune era, it almost sounds like that. But it just doesn't have... Oh, yes, and that's the little thing that signals a boss. This guy is a pretty simple pattern thing. Yeah, you're pretty much looking at it. Oh, and he will kick you occasionally. And sometimes you have to hit him twice. So... Oh, bugger. So the core concept of this game is still the same as the original. It's a left-to-right action platformer. But they clearly didn't think... I don't know how well Legendary Axe sold. Sales data and the like was not really a thing that was easily accessible back in the day. The only thing I can think of is that it did well enough to get a sequel greenlit, but didn't do well enough, so they decided it needed to be... Like so many things are in the video game world, the corporate people thought it needed to be grittier and feel a little bit more like other games, I guess. So we got this, and it's not necessarily horrible, like it plays well. like I said, the music, despite not having the funky theme or the memorability of the first game, definitely it's still really good. They make really excellent use of the TurboGrafx sound chip, if you ask me. But I mean, like I said, it's a game called Legendary Axe, where your starting weapon is not a friggin' axe. And you do still level your weapon, which is nice. As you can see there is a level up there that I'm able to get. Shoot, I can usually beat this guy first time out. Whoops, wrong button. Oh, also, there's that. Now, it didn't work very well, but you may see in the upper right there, beside my lives counter, there's that weird little sort of lit up sphere thing. Basically what that is a screen clearing weapon. So the reason I paused it there by accident is in most games on the TurboGrafx, and indeed all other consoles, the way you pause the game was by pressing start, or in this case the run button on the TurboGrafx. In this case, the select button is what pauses the game, and the start button launches one of those things, which that's what it does. It's a screen clearing weapon. I don't know if it actually does significant damage to the boss or just the equivalent of doing one hit when you use it. It's very hard to say, but so they brought that in, which is kind of a neat idea. The whole concept of clearing the screen sort of on demand, almost like a shmup. That's a neat mechanic, and it's a neat addition. And I do like the fact that this does maintain the weapon power-up methodology of Legendary Axe. Here's how you get him. You gotta jump. That's how you avoid his kick. And it does apply it to more than one weapon, which is kind of neat. But what I liked about, Legendary Axe was the fact that simplicity was kind of the cool part about that. Woo! Way to go, bro. He is just stoked about killing that thing. Also, there was a time limit in this one, which there wasn't in the original Legendary Axe, but like most games like this with a time limit, you gotta kind of really suck to not get to the end within the time limit. It's really more of a bonus mechanic for the score, which, just like the first one, does not have a high score meter. So as you can see, we're in this underground world now, a lot more of these undead enemies. But once again, interesting music, just not... I don't know. It just doesn't have that personality of the original game. And this is kind of a similar thing. It's not really a maze level per se, but you can approach it. There's different directions you can go, and not all of them are required, but if you take all the routes, you can often find yourself some extra loot, things like that. So I like the fact that it does have the level up mechanic applied to different weapons. They did give it more variety, but at the same time, one of the things that was cool about Legendary Axe was that because it focused on only one weapon, the way you mastered that game was by getting good at that one weapon, becoming super proficient with one thing and doing one thing really, really well. In this case, they made it a much more like a Castlevania or something else like that, where they have the multiple weapons, but just nothing feels interesting. Like, this is just a sword, right? You power it up, it gets longer. Sure. Oh, yes. And some really, really frustrating moving block platforming. Oh, yes. Thankfully, you don't die when you screw it up. You just fall down and have to come back up. So it just feels a lot more bog standard and generic now, and I really don't like what they did to the graphics style. I think this looks utterly... There's nothing memorable about the graphics style here at all. It's just... It's serviceable, but it's a much darker palette. It doesn't look nearly as unique or memorable as the original Legendary Axe did. Everything is very darkly shaded, like even the UI up top. Like, look at those fonts. Everything has a very dark hue to it, and that's clearly what they were going for. This is a platformer that has dark themes to it, I suppose. You're not a caveman anymore, you're kind of a barbarian. There's also, by the way, no explanation as to why we've leapt to this time period. Like, it's not even anything as interesting as you're the... distant offspring or whatever of the original character, which really wouldn't matter anyway, because it's so far, this is so far later on that that would really have no bearing on anything. And yeah, it's a passable game, but it's just not the same. You know what I mean? There's... This sounds like kind of a hipster thing to say, but Legendary Axe 1 just felt like it had soul to it. It really felt like a game that was made with passion and care, and by people who had a neat idea for a well-established, well-tread road, and decided to do something, decided to put their own spin on it while maintaining what made that. Hi, I've never actually seen this guy before. That is one nasty-looking fly. Alright, there we go. And they decided to do something that was well within the genre and familiar to anyone who was looking for a game like that, but where you could go, yeah, this is different, and furthermore, this is different and shows something different that the TurboGrafx is doing in particular. And I guess either that didn't go very well, or they thought it could go better, and we ended up with this, which is merely a passable action platformer. I mean, heck knows there are lots of crappy action platformers out there. You could certainly do a lot worse than this. And I mean, this isn't a bad game. If this was actually the only Legendary Axe, I'd probably be like, yeah, you know what, this is alright. Like, if Legendary Axe 1 didn't exist and this came out in its place, I'd probably be like, you know, this is a pretty decent game. But in the shadow of the original Legendary Axe, and sort of with the bar of expectation it's set, I guess, it just feels disappointing, and it feels like they could have done something really cool with a sequel to Legendary Axe, and maintaining and expanding upon what made the original cool, and it just got turned into another corporate feeling genetic slurry game. And it sounds like I'm really, really down on it, and I mean, I certainly don't think of this one the way I think of the first one, but it's actually not bad. It's still a pretty fun game. Like, I actually do enjoy playing it. It just doesn't feel... Oh, God. Hi. Forgot about you. Yeah, yes. This guy's fun. He's rather fun to attempt to dodge. That. Oh! But I had a level 5 sword, so I kind of whooped him. Alright. Usually you don't do this on my first time out. Oh, it's nice I get to show you guys a third level. So yeah, this just feels like a game that was... It feels like a mandated sequel to me. And I'm kind of trying not to sound as down on it as I am, because it's still okay, and it's actually a worthy game to have in your TurboGrafx collection. The TurboGrafx had its fair share of pretty terrible games, and this is not bad. It's just, oh shoot. Yeah, these things are interesting in that they actually don't hurt you, they just constrain you, which is kind of a neat idea, I suppose. Man, this sword looks like a friggin' lightsaber when it's fully leveled up. It's rare that I get to fully level something. It just feels... Yeah, it just doesn't hold up to the original. If you only had to play one, I would recommend the first one without hesitation. And I'm very curious what the history is behind this one, as in what... Hi. As in why it has the Red and Atlas names on it. I don't know if maybe Red and or Atlas published this in Japan. I know Red is just a developer now, but I believe oh good lord. Listen, you've got no time for your wall busting shenanigans. There. I believe Red back in the early days was a publisher as well, so maybe that's what happened. Maybe they put this out there, whereas I believe either Hudson, well, NEC brought it out over here. I don't know if Hudson maybe published it in Japan or if NEC published it there. So maybe they were involved in that, or maybe they developed this on behalf of... what little information I can find on this game says it was developed by Victor Musical, but maybe they didn't actually develop it. Maybe they just, because they owned this game, maybe they sort of sublet it out. I don't know. It definitely does feel like this had different hands at it. Or maybe it was the same hands and they just had a mandate to do something very different and worked with what they had. And it's kind of a bummer. You tend to hear things a little bit more these days. Oh, slow down. From, you know, commentators and the like saying in the modern era with the success of games like Call of Duty and that every first-person shooter that's coming out is a bland military game because, oh, we gotta get that Call of Duty money and things like that. And to a certain... Wow, that guy had one of those screen clearing things. Oh my goodness, I actually did not remember that. That's kind of nasty. So you gotta get out of the screen before that happens. Ooh, that's mean. Now the enemies definitely step it up. Definitely keeping you on your toes here. So it's one of those things where, yeah, they say, oh, every game's trying to be Call of Duty, etc., 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 and they're not wrong about that to a certain degree. I think that line of argument is a little overblown, but at the same time, whoops, hit the wrong button again. Why didn't you put that on select instead of run, guys? Seriously. But this kind of feels like it might have been a very early example of that, of the Legendary Axe didn't sell as well as Castlevania, so rather than try to convince people why our formula of Legendary Axe is a good one that they should embrace, let's just make the game a little bit more like Castlevania or a little bit more like whatever other popular action platformer was out there. And that's kind of a shame, because Legendary Axe really had a soul and a method to it all its own. Hey, there's the axe. Only took to most of the way through the 3rd level to get an actual axe in Legendary Axe 2. And it is kind of a shame, because Legendary Axe is a game that I really felt had its own soul and personality and distinctiveness, and a lot of that is missing here. And it feels a lot more homogenized and just... now I'm back down to level 1, so this game all of a sudden, this level all of a sudden just got a lot worse than I was at, and this was not exactly an easy trip before. Yeah, it's kind of a bummer. It's a good game. It is a good game, and it's worth checking out if you have the means, but it's just not the same thing. And like I said, not to sound too indie hipster about it, but this just... Get back here, you little twit. This just feels like it doesn't have the same soul that the original Legendary Axe did. And this was the last Legendary Axe game we got, so there hasn't been another one, so you really only had the original to get that experience from it. And that's too bad. I would have liked to have seen that lineage, I guess, if you will, continue. I think it would have been more interesting than this. But you can definitely do a lot worse for action platformers, and you can definitely do a lot worse even on the TurboGrafx than this, for sure. So if you like this stuff, I would check it out, but definitely get yourself Legendary Axe 1 and play through that first, because I think there's much more interesting stuff to be found there. So yeah, that is Legendary Axe 2, developed and or published by Victor Musical Industries, Red Entertainment, and Atlas in 1990 for the TurboGrafx-16 and I believe the PC Engine. Yeah, this would have come out in Japan too, so this would have come out on the PC Engine as well, maybe a little earlier. Didn't actually check that. It's good. Legendary Axe 1 is way better. My name's Parallax Abstraction. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you next time.